Morning all. Welcome to the CALS Comm workshop for September. And this month we are focusing on working with the media, media relations and media training. And we have three fabulous people from UComm helping us guide us through this morning. We have Mick Kulikowski, who is the Assistant Director for News and National Media. He covers the Provost Office, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and the College of Engineering. We also have Tracy Peak. She is a podcast phenomenon and covers the College of Sciences, the College of Veterinary Medicine, the Graduate School, the Office of Research, Innovations, and Economic Development. We also have Lauren Barker. She is the Senior Media Relations Strategist and serves as a liaison between the university and broadcast media. So thank you all for joining us today, and over to you.
Thanks, Janine. Welcome, everybody. This is a cool, fun Media Relations 101, we like to call this, this training session. Tracy, Lauren, and I will probably have to get through this pretty quickly because there are quite a few slides, but we do want you to, if you have questions while we're presenting, please put them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll try to get to your questions in the middle of our presentation. We also will try to finish in enough time so that you can have some questions towards the end if we can get through it. So we'll hustle and do our best to try to get through it. Let's go to the first slide. Lauren, can you help me? Yeah. So a quick thing on is that the first slide? What is news? Lots of people ask us about, is my work newsworthy or not? And so here's some of the things that we find are newsworthy, sort of out of the ordinary, sort of quirky, obviously important, timely. Kids and wallet issues are real important. If it affects your children, it affects your pocketbook. Those are all things that are newsworthy. We also used to, you can see that little cartoon in the middle, chocolate, robots. We sometimes say sex, death, and money are three things that are really important. But at NC State, we do a lot of really good research, a lot of important problem-solving research. And in a lot of ways, what we find, and sometimes, we might find by accident, sometimes we are looking for something and have an hypothesis and it doesn't work out, sort of anomalies. Those things are also interesting, like you're really expecting something to happen and it doesn't happen. That's also newsworthy, so. So today we're going to talk about why you would want to work with media. It's not something that you come out of the womb knowing how to do. It's a sort of a different process. We're going to try to sort of lift the veil a little bit today and talk about some things about what a reporter is, what are they looking for, some ways that you can prepare. We frequently call this a balance of power issue when you're being interviewed in all the different formats, be it for print or radio or TV. And by saying that, I mean that the interviewer kind of knows what they want to ask you and what they're trying to extract from you, and you don't necessarily know that. And so there's a balance of power differential that's difficult. And sometimes for type A folks like us, it's hard to sort of accept that power differential. And so how can you level that balance of power out? Part of it is by preparing really well. And part of this business too is you hear this all the time. It's a relationship business. So dealing with a reporter, dealing with media, dealing with a TV reporter, these are all things that you build a relationship like you would with anyone else. And so if you treat it right, if you do it the right way, that reporter is apt to come back to you and maybe have you become a source for that reporter in the future. And so we talk a little bit about in this presentation about how you can build relationships. And it's an interesting thing. I've been doing this for a long time. Relationship building helps you in the end. It can give you a break when things are going the bad way, and it can help you out if things are going well. And so it's like a lot of other things. Building relationships are real important in order to have a good, successful, in our case, career here, but also to help promote and protect the university. Let's move on. This is still me, Tracy. So why would a reporter want to talk to you? Again, some of the newsworthy things that we talked about before, they're looking for expertise in a lot of things, right? Reporters, as we'll get to in a minute, are sort of a mile wide and an inch deep. They might know a lot about, they have a wide span in many ways, especially local reporters who might be covering a wreck one day and a piece of research the next day and a child abduction the next day. So they're all sort of all over the place. And so they need expertise. They need people who know how to do this stuff to come to them and tell them how these things work. Obviously, research-based information is important. Reporters can also be there for when something controversial or there's breaking news. There's an earthquake. We need an earthquake expert to talk about things. There's a hurricane. We need climatologists, and we need structural engineers, and we need all these different folks to talk about what happens when a hurricane comes. This is a really critical part of what NC State does as it tries to promote the university, is to promote its experts to be able to talk about a wide range of topics. Let's go on, Lauren. Tracy, you want to go?
Okay, yeah. So this is why you want to talk to reporters, and this is something that we emphasize every time we come meet with you, when we introduce ourselves to you as news services people. There are a lot of benefits to this. It's not just you can reach a larger audience, build a mutually beneficial relationship, become the go-to expert. There are other advantages that accrue. Like, all of these things are good, right? You want to be able to get your work out to as large an audience as possible. Reporters and the media are the best way to magnify your message quickly. But there are also some things on the academic side that you need to consider as well. For example, a lot of grants now have outreach components to them. Media relations and knowing how to build relationships with reporters, speak to the media, translate your work into layperson friendly and relevant language. All of that can fulfill that particular aspect of your grant. And it can also, we never say that this is a one-to-one relationship, but generally speaking, if you are good at getting out there, if you are good at utilizing media to amplify your message, it does increase your opportunities for maybe not just grants, but also if you're looking to partner with industry or people in a particular segment of the economy. If they're aware of your work, or they become aware of your work through media, that's another way to get in touch with the relevant people. It's a way to sometimes build bridges to colleagues within your field that you may not know. It opens up a lot of opportunities. It's not 100%, oh, I got a story in the NNO, now I'm going to get all this grant money and be, set forever and tenure and my life is wonderful. But it is another tool in your toolkit. So you do want to talk to reporters. If they are showing an interest in your work, it means that it has relevance to an audience outside of academia. And particularly for this audience that we're talking to today, that's extremely relevant. A lot of you all are in extension. You deal with the public directly. Media can help you get your message out there as well. Okay, do the next slide. So, who are reporters? Mick already mentioned their knowledge tends to be like a mile wide and an inch deep. They're covering a ton of different things every day. That's more true now than ever. When we started, or when I started here, we had at least one designated science reporter for the News and Observer, and then she went away, and for a while we were pitching science stories to the travel editor at the Charlotte Observer. So reporters, by and large, have to be quick studies. They have to be able to figure out what's important, do it in a timely manner, drill down understand what you're doing. Whoa, we're moving around a little bit.
I really don't.
um, if we could go, yeah. Oh, we're just going back through. It's fine.
No, I know.
It's fine. Anyway, so they're also skeptical. Just because you tell them something, Aranza Sue, there's not a designated science reporter right now for the NNO. Just as an aside, we sometimes will get an intern in the summer who covers science, and that's kind of hit and miss as well. So that's the challenge that we're up against now. And we'll talk a little bit more later about some of the additional challenges of the current moment in trying to get science stories covered. So, you know, they're generally intelligent people and capable people, but they're not going to have the same vocabulary you do. Okay, and so that's where you need to be aware when you're speaking with a reporter of a few tips and tricks to make sure that your message is delivered clearly, concisely, and doesn't get misinterpreted. So, and then we can go on.
And the deadline driven is really important too. You know, usually reporters are looking for something 2 hours ago, and they work on a very different time beat than academics do. You know, sometimes academics would say, we'll have those results soon. That could mean 6 months to a year. To a reporter, soon means like in the next 10 minutes. And so sometimes words like soon and in the foreseeable future are different because we're on such very different you know, versions of time. So that's an important thing too, is to remember that a reporter is almost always on some kind of deadline. It may not be immediate, but a lot of times it is. And for them, a long deadline is like a week. And so it doesn't really mesh too well with academics, but we figure out a way to work around it.
Okay, so Lauren, did you want to take the next couple or?
Yeah, I'll jump in. All
Okay.
right.
Sure.
So when a reporter calls, first you need to find out what exactly they are looking for. When do they need this story by, and how they want to do the story. Do they want to do this over the phone? Do they want to do it over Zoom? Do they want to talk to you in person and do this an on-camera interview? That's going to totally depend on, you know, change the way that you're actually preparing for this interview too, depending on how they want to actually interview you. So you need to make sure that you know all those, what they're planning for this story, and then let them know if you think that you can actually answer the question that they're looking for or do the story. And if you can't, maybe help them look for somebody else who can. Always call us or email us if you have a question. If it's controversial, definitely reach out to one of us. You know, we don't want to, we try to avoid talking on politics and, you know, leaning one way or the other. So if it is a topic that is controversial, and that's a lot of things right now, just reach out to us, feel free to, and we'll help you. We'll, you know, say, okay, make sure you focus on this part of the topic, but don't, you know, don't put in your opinions into it or anything. So yeah, we are here to help you, and we can help you decide whether we should do this over the phone or an in-person interview.
And also there's one other thing. If the person is calling you and you don't do what they're asking for, feel free to refer them to a colleague or somewhere else. And you can even refer them to just a different university. Like it doesn't matter. If you're helpful to this reporter, they'll remember that. So the next time they come back to you, you know, you'll get the little gold star. Oh, this person is responsive and helpful, even if you can't answer the question they have that particular day.
That Tracy's right. That's definitely part of the relationship building aspect of this. And then the other thing I did want to say a little bit more about, you know, the fourth bullet about asking for advice if it's a crisis. So with the thing like COVID-19 and the pandemic, you know, there might have been a lot of reporters out asking faculty or extension people, so what is the university going to do about this? For a thing of that nature, where we really tried to centralize some of the responses to COVID-19 preparedness, what the university is doing, that sort of stuff. So there was a core group here in university communications who was responding to just about everything. So if there's something like that related to a COVID-19, what's the university doing about X aspect of COVID-19? When are the students coming back? All this sort of stuff. Feel free to pass those on to us because we're equipped to handle those. There are a lot of people here, and you can get, ask 45,000 people and get 45,000 different answers. For something like that, like COVID-19 response, we'd like to actually have that come from the central unit. So feel free to, in the future, pass some of that stuff on to us because we'll triage it and take care of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rantasu, for pandemic stuff, it is me. I work with Mary Cole, who's our issues management person, and then my bosses Fred Hartman and Brad Bolander, and usually the four of us divide the work up and conquer. So that, yeah, just pass people on to me.
Okay, going forward, we kind of touched on a little bit of this in the last slide, but make sure that you know exactly who the reporter is and where they're from. I know that can you can kind of miss that on the phone a lot of times. Hey, I'm such and such from this, and then you totally skip back and you don't even know who you're actually doing the interview for. So make sure you get all that information when they need to do the story by. Make sure you fully understand the topic, and feel free to ask them questions. Don't just wait for them to ask you questions. Feel free, if you have questions about what they're trying to cover, go ahead and ask them so that way you're more prepared. Like we said, make sure you know how the interview is going to be conducted, whether that's on the phone or Zoom, just an email quote or in person. And then at the end, make sure you do know when the story will run so that way you can keep it for yourself and you can track it. And maybe share with your other colleagues or share it amongst yourself.
And it is, the other thing we'd like to add is that if you're uncertain about what the person, who the person in the outlet is, and there are a lot of them these days, they span the gamut politically, they're all over the country, they're all over the world. We would never expect someone who doesn't do this for a living to know what every outlet means. Give us a call, send us an email, and ask us about, hey, I've never heard of this outlet before, and I looked it up and looked kind of shaky. We can help you, especially with the local people. We know everyone around here. There's a reporter that might be a little iffy about how they're going to take on a topic, or they've covered it in a certain way before. We can, help you out, help you figure out whether we should actually go ahead and do the interview. So feel free to use this as a resource if you need more background information about who's calling.
And that's a good point, Mick. Yeah, especially with local people, we know a lot of them how they cover stories, whether it's on your topic in the past or not. Just they have a general, way about them that they cover certain stories. So we can maybe even prepare you with that. Like, hey, they're kind of blunt in the way that they ask questions, or they're, a little harsh. So that'll just come to us, and we'll help you as much as we can. So this is probably one of the most important things. Before you do your interview, you need to, each of you have an extensive amount of information and knowledge in your topic. We want to make sure that we get that down to 2 or 3 key points, because those are the key points that you need to drill and stay focused on whenever you're doing the interview. A reporter is likely, if it's a TV or radio, you're probably going to have like a minute 20. That's how long the whole story is going to be. So if you're trying to tell about your entire research project, that's likely not going to happen in a minute and 20. So what are the 3 main points that you think that the audience to which this outlet is showcasing would be interested in, and stay on those? If it seems to be getting off track a little bit, try to bring it back to those main key points. We can help you decide what those 2 or 3 key points are. And make sure that you're providing examples and anecdotes and speaking on their language, speaking in common language, instead of using any jargon that they may not understand. Do you guys want to add into that one?
Yeah, this is the part where if folks were talking about wanting to be more effective at communicating to a lay audience, preparing your 3 main points is your chance in layperson language to tell the world exactly what it is you do. And so when we talk about using examples and anecdotes, sometimes making comparisons can help if you're dealing with an extremely complex issue. It's basically you've spent a lot of time acquiring a vocabulary that is specialized, and now you have to de-acquire that vocabulary a little bit, because if we do a press release with you, we will spend the time defining those terms for the media. If you're doing a television interview and you've got like 6 to 10 seconds to say what you're going to say, you don't have time to delve into that. So if you want to run your key points by us, because none of us are scientists, to see if we understand it, we are really good at giving feedback and just saying, nope, no idea, and then sort of helping talk through the process. So we are happy to help with that if you have an interview coming up as well.
During the interview, make sure that, like we said, you're staying focused on those key points that we have talked about, and that you've prepared. Keep it simple. Don't try and over explain something, just whenever, like, usually your topic, it best. Whatever's coming first is probably, the best way to explain it. But if there is at some point that you say, can I actually rephrase that? That's okay. I mean, make sure that you're able to do that if you need to. We try to avoid saying off the record and no comment, because that makes it seem like you're hiding something. So we try to be upfront and honest as much as possible. If there's something that you don't know, that's okay. Say, I don't know. And that's way better than just saying no comment or I can't speak to that. Just say, I'm not sure, but I will look into that for you and get back to you. Can I follow up with an email? And once you've made your point, just stop talking. Don't try to keep going and going and going.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, there is such a thing as off the record, but it gets really complicated. And so I would just, we counsel everybody to just avoid it. If you're, in the middle of political machinations with the White House, there probably is such a thing as off the record, and those people understand what it is. Common researchers who are just doing, their work and trying to talk about their story is, off the record is just something that you shouldn't really reach for. No comment. If you can't tell something because it's a student privacy matter or it's a medical issue, you can tell people that FERPA or HIPAA prevent us from talking about whatever it is. Those sorts of things. So you can no comment just makes you kind of look a little shifty. And yeah, the last point about making your point, stop talking. Most of you probably ask me to do that right now, but it's important, because you start to, if you just try to keep going, you start to branch off into these other places where you want to go, which is the opposite, where your 2 or 3 main messages are, and it just takes you off into the road that you really don't want to go. So nature abhors a vacuum. It's totally understandable when people are both just sitting looking at each other in a Zoom meeting. Someone wants to fill that silence. It's sort of it's just natural, right? It's the same when you're face to face with somebody. But the best thing to do is make your point and just stop and politely wait for your next question.
And on a related point to that, we caution people, don't speculate. That's part of staying focused, keeping it simple, and being honest. If someone asks you what someone else might think about your work, don't answer that question. If they want to know what that person thinks about your work, they can totally go ask that other person, right? It's not, that way lies madness and denied tenure. So don't do that. Okay?
Also, people ask for speculation on what the chancellor would say, or what the athletic director would say. Your answer is basically, ask that person. I can't talk for them. I don't speak for the chancellor.
Yeah.
Or even comparing schools. UNC is handling this way. What do you guys have to say about that? Well, I can't comment on what.
I don't. Yeah. I work here. I don't work there. So.
Yeah. So. Okay.
Nick.
Yep. Okay. So this is a rarity, right? Most times when we're talking about our research, or there's a story about science or technology, things going on at the university, they're generally more easygoing. They just want to find out about your work. There are times, though, that you may be hit with some tough questions. And we suggest that when you sort of start off and agree to an interview, you might have some of these things in your back pocket on man, they might ask how much this is going to cost, or where the funding comes from, or were any animals killed in this research, or did we do it at a time when there were budget cuts, or lots of different weird aspects. And so you might want to think about in your back pocket, and we can actually help you with that. You tell us what the story is. We might, we're trained here to be a little bit skeptical, so we usually start thinking about where could this go bad. But the way to handle it really is something called sort of bridging. And if you think about a bridge takes you from one point over some water or something else to another, moving from the question asked to one that you want to answer. And so there are lots of ways that you can, get your talking point back into things. The real issue here, Jim, is blank rather than the question that Jim asked. A really important thing here to note, Bobby, is blank. Sarah, another way to look at that, what you're asking, is blank, back to your message, right? These are, you see politicians do this with skill and ease, and I do not want you to act like a politician when you do an interview, that if you watch a Sunday morning TV show with politics, all you're going to hear is their talking points. So they might ask you, why is the sky blue? And they're going to tell you about their 3-point plan for restoring the economy, right? So they're not going to answer the question. Don't want you to do that. But this is one way of sort of getting off whatever that topic where they're trying to go and bridging back to your points. You guys want to add anything to that?
Well, if you're talking specifically about, data or research, you can always say, that's not part of what this project was covering. What we covered was blah, blah, blah. It's another way to kind of get back to it that's more scientific, I guess. It is rare that this happens, but again, here's the thing. If you have a question that you're afraid to answer, you better have an answer prepared for it. Because the one time that you don't have that answer prepared will be the time that you get the question, and then you will hem and haw, and that will become the story instead of what you actually want to talk about. So, we're not trying to be pessimistic like everyone's out to get you, but there are, folks who like to make hay with where your funding came from and animals, and so you need to be able to answer those questions. And like Mick said, we're happy to help.
And again, you don't necessarily volunteer them, but it's something that you have in your back pocket to answer. A lot of them, again, what Tracy reiterated, the money and sort of the mechanisms of how what research, how the research was undertaken. Those would be the two places where people sometimes go. It's, again, pretty rare. 97% of the interviews I've seen, you don't even have to think about this. There's a couple percent where you have to think about it, and you probably know going in that there might be a couple of, either squeamish or things that maybe you want to try to get around. So again, we can help if you are faced with that situation. A little bit more on this. So, sometimes you might get a question, and this could happen in all different formats, right? Again, reporters mile wide, inch deep might not totally get it. And so, what you're asking me is blank, so that you don't both start diverging on where you think you're going. We talked about this before. Don't speculate or speak for someone else. You can just tell the reporter to talk to that person. And the third one is really, really important. I've seen this in action. We had, I'll tell a little anecdote here. I think we're doing pretty good on time. Our nuclear reactor, this is maybe 12 years ago or so, nuclear reactor was leaking some water. And one of the local TV stations, I won't say which one it is, WTVD, was basically saying, we have like radiation leaking everywhere. This water has got to be tainted, and is everybody going to die who walks by it, and that sort of thing. And I'm in Hawaii, who's the director of the nuclear reactor. We invited the media in, showed them the control room, showed them the different things going on, explained to them about the leak, that sort of stuff, all the ways that it was being mitigated. And, you know, the question over and over again that he got asked about 7 different ways was, is NC State safe? And the answer was yes, NC State was safe. There was some water leak here. I told you all the ways that it was mitigated, and it's not really, that water even still was not dangerous, toxic. And so he did a tremendous job of keeping us cool, answered the same question 7 different ways, in the same way, with the same point. And it was just it was an example of watching somebody with grace under pressure. And that's sort of the thing that you have to think of is, keeping your cool. You've probably seen, there's on the internet, and you've seen it before, some guy, grab the mic off him, throw it, and then run away. Like, you don't want to do that, right? Because that makes you a viral story from the start, and it makes it look like you're just, running away from something. Keeping you cool is super important if you ever get asked really tough questions. So I'll stop there.
Okay, Zoom interviews. You're all probably pretty versed by now at talking on Zoom, but if you are doing an actual interview with a media outlet, make sure that your background is appropriate. You don't have like loads of laundry or trash behind you, or whatever else. You don't have a screaming child, which I do about 90% of the time. So try to avoid that. Try not to do the floating head effect if you're using one of the digital backgrounds. Sometimes you can go in and out on those digital backgrounds. So if it's possible, try to just look for like a plain white wall or something that that is going to be stable and you're not going to be digitized. Don't wear something that's like really, really colorful and drastic in what you're wearing. Don't wear like a logoed outfit that has, or anything that has like graphic writing on it, obviously. Try to just look professional, just like you would for a regular interview. Make sure your environment is quiet, speak clearly, and wear pants. That is important because, as you've seen at the beginning of whenever everybody started doing Zoom and there was that one reporter who stood up in his screen, which is possible. All of us could stand up at one point or another. We don't intend to, but make sure you're wearing pants.
The other thing, have you seen Rate My Room? So I believe it's a Twitter account, and it's essentially a person or group of people who watch Zoom interviews on, I guess, the major cable networks and rate the backgrounds of the people behind them. So you go into a Zoom interview as though you want to, get a good score on Rate My Room. I know it's hard, if you've got a lot of people in the house, navigating is difficult. But a natural setting, if it's, moderately attractive, is probably the best way to go.
Mick, you have anything to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay. After the interview, make sure that you confirm with them when that story is expected to run. Most of the time, TV people, they're going to know, hey, this is running in the 5 o'clock news, or this is running tomorrow at noon. Newspapers, they might have like a little bit more flexible deadline, depending on when they can fully get their story done. But just stay in touch with them. If they say, I think it's going to be sometime next week, then follow up in a couple days maybe and say, hey, did you get an update on when that will be? Provide your business card so that they know exactly how to contact you, and ask for theirs as well. Never ask to approve the story. It's kind of just a rude thing to do, and it kind of shows that you don't trust the reporter. That's how I would take it. So it just make sure that you are available and say if you have any other follow-up questions, especially if it's like something to deal with numbers that they might need to follow back up with you on. Hey, you mentioned this. Is this the right number that you were referring to? Or this specific method, is this how you pronounced or spelled that method? So just make sure that you're available for those follow-up questions for the details, but just don't ask to actually approve the story. Yeah.
Especially if the science is a little bit more complicated, that availability for follow-up questions is important, because depending on the skill level of the reporter, they may have questions afterwards, right? This is again another sort of personal and a nature thing, but a lot of times you're interviewing somebody and you're listening, nodding your head. I get it. I don't want to appear stupid, so I'm just going to keep nodding my head. And then you realize later on, this is really complex and I don't get it. And so they might need to call you back. The third bullet is really important, approving the story. If you ask to approve the story, it makes you look like a rube, like you've never done this business before, because there is no journalist worth his or her salt who will ask you to ever sign off on a story. It just doesn't happen.
Well,
Tracy
once
and
it
I,
happened.
Tracy and I have seen this twice happen, and it was with a paleontologist who still works here, and she was asked basically, I just want to make sure that I've got the science right on this. Mary, can you approve this? Can you see, read this paragraph and make sure that I got the science right? And so she was able to actually look at the science portion of that story, and she, yeah, I think approved it or whatever she did. But that's the closest I've ever seen any journalist asking for, like, can you look at this story and make sure it's right? They just don't do that. This is important. We've touched on a little bit about this throughout the presentation, but knowing the outlets and reporters covering maybe your topic, your beat, we can certainly help you with that. We've talked a lot about sort of local reporters who are a mile wide and inch deep. There are some reporters, science reporters out there, freelancers, and in places like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, others, Washington Post. Science is their beat, and so they actually understand a lot about it, and they cover it, and they do it for a living. And so in those cases, you might get some more questions, and you might have a little bit more trust in a reporter that's going to get something right. If somebody covers entomology for a living and you're an entomologist, they might actually know some of the things, but I would still start off with the non-jargon, the most simple way of explaining your stuff. You'll get, in the course of your interview, you'll get a good sense that person might know a little bit more what they're talking about, and you might be able to delve a little bit deeper with them. But I think what we said earlier still holds true. You want to have 2 or 3 things. You want to speak as simply as you can. You want to avoid jargon when you can. Reporters really don't like to be called on the phone. They don't mind talking to you on the phone, but they don't really want to be called. And so following up with a phone call is a thing that public relations people do, despised by reporters, right? A public relations firm will send out a press release to a bunch of reporters, and then we'll literally the next day we'll start calling them and say, hey, did you receive my release? You must be interested. The reporter hates nothing more than that, and it's an easiest way to get blacklisted by a reporter. That is the opposite of building a relationship with a reporter. Trust me when I say that if a reporter is interested in your work, the reporter is going to get back to us. I mean, it's just going to happen. And they're either going to get back to us, the people who wrote the story, or they're going to call you directly. And so, reporters don't need reminders. They will either take your story or they won't. If you're into social media, there are opportunities to engage with social media, to engage with reporters online. And so there are a bunch of reporters who are very cognizant and and use social media a lot and are out there on it. And correspondingly, there are a bunch of researchers that are on social media. If you are one of those people, a Paul Byrne, a Katie Mack, a Ben Chapman, who are already well known on social media, it's certainly fine for you to engage with reporters that way. It might be the most direct way to do it. COVID-19 has changed the way that reporting is done these days. You'll probably notice there's a whole lot of stories the last 6 months that are just about COVID-19. People who have never covered medicine or vaccines or a virus before are now doing it, especially in your local media. And so the news hole, the place where you can have news about different things shrinks because so much of it is focused on COVID-19. And so you have to be cognizant of that, right? If there's something really big going on in the world with a vaccine, your news about a bug might not get the attention that it would normally get. You just have to sort of understand that. Arantisu, yes, pitching stories as they intersect with COVID-19 is good, and we've tried to do that a lot over the last 6 months. I was trying to find your other question. We always pitch via email. That's what we do, because again, just calling a reporter these days just doesn't work. They get reached out to by hundreds of people like us a day.
But
And so, you know, you have to make your pitch, I think, short, to the point, and you have to understand what the reporter wants, what the reporter's beat is, what the reporter has covered before.
Mick, will you talk about how, like what you're explaining versus like a traditional press release, like how they differ, what is best practice right now versus what may have, like what we're leaving behind?
Sure. I mean, I think you know, I always think less is more. And so the traditional process is we work with a researcher, we write a story, a press release, we post it. What we're not going to do is just take it and wallpaper it everywhere, right? We want to send it to the people who are going to be interested in it. So we're not going to send a material science reporter a story about a bug. We're not going to do that, right? We're going to get it into the right place. It's kind of what we talked about before. You got to find the right people and you got to give them the information that they want. So a pitch is just a way that we reach out to reporters to say, hey, Joe, I know you cover moths and you've covered moths in the past. We've got this really cool moth story. You might be interested in it. Here's a link to the paper. Here's the contact information for the researcher. And here's a link to the story that we just wrote about it. You might be interested in that. Boom, that's it. It's not a 7-paragraph treatise on what the news release says. It tries to capture what the research was about in basically a sentence or two. And so that's generally how it works. We have this story that's out there, but on the side, we're letting reporters who we think are interested. It might be a half dozen, it might be a dozen, it might be 20. It just depends on the topic and what it is. But if it's a math story, we might have 3 or 4 or 5 people who actually cover math. And if it's and so we're trying to actually segment who it is that would be interested in it, and then give it to them in the most easy way to digest it, which is a simple email with a link to the story, a link to the paper itself, if possible, and then the contact information for the person that person needs to reach. And then we sort of try to a little bit get out of the way, because we don't want to be a middleman in between a researcher and a reporter. Reporters don't like having to go through people, right? They're skeptics. They deal with PR people all the time. They generally don't like them. And so what they want to do is just get to the information. And so we try to provide that in the easiest and simplest manner. I don't know if I've messed this up, Tracy, or not, but.
No, I was going to interject. Carrie had a question. If we maintain lists of outlets and reporters we can access, if you have a pitch or a story idea that you want to get into the hands of a particular subset of media, we can certainly work with you and do that. Our lists are very situational. Do you know what I mean? So we have a tool that we use to build lists, and it will truly vary. There's not like one, this is the science list, because we cover so many different varieties of science. I'm not going to send your story to Chemistry World, if you're not a chemist, kind of thing. So yes, we can certainly help you with that. If you're trying to locate a particular outlet that covers a particular thing, we can certainly work with you. So just give us a holler and we'll
and a lot of this is audience, right? Like a lot of people think, well, my work is important. The audience is everyone. Well, what we try to help people think about is maybe the audience isn't everyone. Maybe the audience is this subset of niche journalists, right? Another thing I should say is that we really think that, we want to be in the New York Times every day. I'm not going to lie to you. We want to be in the Wall Street Journal every day. That's part of our job here. But some news is not for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. It might be for chemical and engineering news, which is 100,000 chemical engineers who, if you really want to get that news out to your peers, that's the journal to be in, right? How many chemical engineers are reading the New York Times? I don't know the answer, but it's some subset of the 2 million people that subscribe to the paper. And so audience identification is important. With the audience identification, reporter identification is real important. And then trying to give them the information and sort of get out of the way is, to me, those are the three like really basic, most important things that you can do to publicize work effectively.
And Aranza Sue asked a question, do reporters have time to cover seminars and lectures, especially if they have policy implications? That's another situational one. It would depend.
Generally,
no.
Generally, no is my answer. But they really have to be into whatever that thing is, and they might go mostly to find someone else there who they've been trying to cultivate or find other sources. And so, especially around here, so if we're talking locally, the answer is definitely no. The News and Observer is down to like 30 reporters. When I started here, it was like close to 200. Okay, they had, as Tracy said before, there was a dedicated science reporter, there was a dedicated environment reporter, there were 9 people on the business desk. Today there are 2. There was a health reporter, there was a medicine reporter. There was all this stuff. Now there are not. And so they don't have time to go to an hour-long seminar on anything, pretty much. And so, generally, yeah, you do. You do need to
support local journalists. Yeah.
But, since they were bought by McClatchy, basically, like the NNO makes money, but they have to send a lot of it to Sacramento, California, where McClatchy is based, although they're now being sold. And so, or I think they're getting ready to be sold. And so a hedge fund is buying them. McClatchy is in, big trouble. Most newspapers are in big trouble. This is why, like what I was trying to talk about before, freelancers are important, because freelancers are out there selling their work to big, good magazines and places like the Times and the Wall Street Journal. And those niche publications, I think, are important in your respective fields, because you're actually reaching audience of people like you. You might be able to, collaborate them on work. Someone in industry might be reading that niche publication and want to fund your work. I mean, there's lots of different ways of working that. And so, lots of people think the biggest ones off the top. I would suggest that you actually really, really, really think about your audience seriously when you start to think about publicizing your work.
Right, and there's kind of a related thing around the Sue, so we're not trying to like shut you down completely. Mick is right. Locals don't have the time or the bandwidth to cover that kind of thing, but there are plenty of policy journals and policy focused maybe publications that you might want to find and cultivate for a particular topic if you think you have something of interest. It's just not probably going to, it'll be, again, like Mick said, one of the nichier publications. And that brings us to working with us. We are here to help you. Yay. But we cannot help you if you do not tell us what you are doing. I know that it's hard to be top of mind. You have a whole bunch of people that you have to communicate with on a daily basis just to keep your labs running and your, classes going and your grants fulfilled and everything else. But yes, and we partner with all of the individual college communications teams as well. So as long as you're just tell somebody in communications what's happening, and we'll go and we will help you out. Like I answered Carrie's question earlier, yes, we can help you identify news outlets. We can help you identify the proper reporters. We just need to know early kind of what you're doing. Particularly if we're going to prepare a traditional press release for your work, because journals nowadays are just crazy and they just will sometimes put your uncorrected proofs up there, or maybe they'll get your proofs back and pop them up there the same day. So the earlier you can involve us in the process, the better off we'll be, so that we're not trying to send out a press release for a story that's like 2 months old. And if you want to promote news about something Aranzasu to the university, the Bulletin is sort of that central news source, and Suzanne Stannard is the editor of the Bulletin, so feel free to ping her with an email if you have something that you would like included in that. That would be great. We can, yes, Carrie, we will also give you the presentation slides after this. I think Janine will handle that.
Mhm.
We can also help you place op-eds, which are kind of a neat third option, I guess, beyond a straight news release or a pitch. And it might be a good fit for someone working in your field, Aranzasu, if it's policy related. It's not necessarily a story. You're not asking someone to come out and cover a lecture, but if they have a particularly interesting take on something timely that is happening now, you can reach out to us and we could talk about the possibility of placing an op-ed. There are some restrictions, and again, you know, with news the way it is, the submissions are a little harder to get through, but okay. We can see what we can do about that as well. Okay, like our goal, and I think everyone's goal here, is to elevate the reputation of this university because we're really cool. So we're happy to help you do that.
And we have other, we have other mechanisms too. So we have a research blog called The Abstract. So it doesn't have to necessarily even be current research. It could be stuff that you've done over time. It could be stuff that you're looking to do. And so that's one way of getting more research work out there. Tracy has a monthly podcast that we've started to do in the last basically 2 years, and so it's called The Audio Abstract, based on the same abstract concept of our research blog. That we might consider just not even writing a story, but just pitching an idea to a reporter. So there's lots of different ways of skinning this cat, and one size doesn't fit all. Everyone knows the press release. It doesn't have to be that necessarily. It could be, and we will write a press release for you if you tell us when if you have a good paper and you let us know when it was accepted. Like, when it's accepted is when you should contact us. That gives us the best amount of time to be able to work with you to write something that we're both happy with, and then to actually make sure that it has success when it's released. And so Tracy alluded to it. People are just throwing papers online these days, sort of, with seemingly no, just like sort of randomly, just like get them up there as quick as possible. So that makes the job a little bit more difficult. But there are still some journals that have embargo dates, like Science and Nature and PNAS and a bunch of Cell and a bunch of others. We certainly work with embargoes and know how to do all that stuff. And so we'll never bust an embargo. We'll never release your work early. We've been doing this for a long time and we know how it works. So, contact us. If you have something that's, sort of maybe just CALS related, contact the CALS communication staff. They're great. And again, as Tracy said, we work together. So I'm in contact with Janine and Molly and Dee. And to talk about who has time to take the story. A lot of my time has been taken up COVID-19, to be honest with you, for the last 6 months. So I haven't been able to cover the CALS beat very well. And so I'll take a beating for that. But, been doing other things that you've probably seen our name in the media some about COVID-19 and opening and closing and stuff. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. But we're here to help you. We have a staff full of people who know how to do this business. We've all been here for a good amount of time. We've all been doing this business for a long time. So we're happy to help, and we encourage you to reach out to us.
And I have one more thing to add real quick. We can do at the time needed media training for you. Say that you are contacted by a reporter and it's on a topic and you want us to help you go through and find those 3 or 4 key points, and we can do like a just-in-time media training with you, and we'll pretend like I'm the reporter, and so that way you're getting used to answering the questions, and we'll help you guide and prepare how to answer those questions. So just let us know if you are contacted. We can definitely help you prepare in that way.
We are here to help.
Yep. Any other questions? We're happy to take them.
I think we have 2 minutes. Oh, 4 minutes.
It's great at covering a lot in a short period of time, and I think it helps all of us in major Zoom fatigue keep our attention on the topic when you move so fast. So I appreciate it, certainly.
All right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
you.
So in our October CalsComm workshop, which is happening October 29th, which happens to be my birthday, October is the best, we will cover NC State Extension outreach communications. And so that will happen also the same channel at 10 a.m. on October 29th. So be on the lookout. Also be on the lookout for a feedback survey from this session, along with the links for the recording and their slides.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Janine, are we already on your distribution list for those trainings?
Once you've signed up once, you should be.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then thanks to Tracy, Lauren, and Mick. This was awesome. And again, anytime you all have questions, you're welcome to reach out to anybody on the CALS communication team or anybody on the UCOM News Services team, or both. That might, there's no harm in adding extra email addresses. It helps to lift all ships.
Through email.
Through
All
email.
things are possible. Yes.